Well, welcome everybody to the online program for the alumni of the Sunshine Coast Health Center up here in Powell River, BC. And our new topic, is on the stigma of addiction, or what I call the dominant narrative. So we've been gearing up for a big research project, and part of that is reading a whole bunch of background material on addiction, all these research studies on treatments, how to measure them, things like that. Anyway, one of the most fascinating things that we've been discovering is that these research studies seem to be concluding more or less the same thing, which is really quite remarkable in the scientific field, because usually you expect a few differences. But it's remarkable that although some people may come at it from a neuroscience point of view, or some people come at it from different schools of psychology, whatever, they're all I shouldn't say all, the vast majority of them are concluding that the reason people do drugs is because of some sort of defectiveness. And we've talked about this defectiveness before in the online program. In the old days, of course, they were morally defective. You know, they're a bunch of lazy, irresponsible sinners. Nowadays, the defectiveness has to do with very poor coping skills, or the neural predisposition to addiction, or it's a mental health issue, something's wrong with their brain chemistry. All of these sorts of defectiveness ideas. Anyway, so I often wonder, where did all of these ideas come from, and why are they maintained? Well, we'll talk about why they're maintained, because one of the things about research, it's supposed to be very objective and look at things for exactly what they are. And yet, we find this consistent story going on in the research that the person has a disease of the brain, a very popular one today, or at least a disorder, or they have these maladaptive coping skills, as they're called, maladaptive learned behavior, or they're doing the drugs as a response to some sort of family problems, or these ideas. Where do they come from, and why have they taken hold in Canada and the United States? Not so much in other parts of the world, by the way, but Canada and the United States. This is rock solid, this idea of defectiveness. And so one of the articles I ran across was by a fellow by the name of Kurt Hersey, and what he did is he looked at Hollywood movies where addiction was portrayed, and he picked 3 of them, 28 Days, When a Man Loves a Woman, and Clean and Sober, because the main scene was an actual treatment center, so you would watch the person go through treatment. Clean and Sober would be Michael Keaton, 28 Days, Sandra Bullock. When a Man Loves a Woman, Meg Ryan. Anyway, and what he concluded from looking at these 3 movies is that they all give a pretty stereotypical view of sort of who this addict is and what they will require for recovery. And number 1 on the hit list by far is the whole concept of this person has lost control of themselves. So the addict has lost control. They're no longer capable of making any sort of good decision for themselves or intelligent. That's the stigma. When we look at what treatment is actually available, those stereotypes, this portrayal that Hollywood does of this typical addict, I mean, it really doesn't translate very well into the real world, but it's very good for a Hollywood movie. Okay? So the stigma idea, and this is important for everyone to grasp hold of, and if you were a client at Sunshine Coast Health Center, you recall as part of sort of the relapse prevention piece that we do talk about the stigma and how the clients are going to be able to deal with the stigma when they get out of here. But anyway, I thought we'd spend a little bit of time looking at the stigma, and then we'll look on at some research on why the stigma is not very helpful, and maybe a few clues on how to deal with it. But the first thing is always to be aware of the stigma. Anyway, we'll be back next week with another edition.